Hey guys, as some of you know, I am a comic book / manga creator myself, and so we use a lot of tools, we do a lot of stuff, and usually, especially right now, I do a lot of work with Copic Markers when I want to do traditional illustrations. But today we're going to find out if these can match. There have been other art YouTubers that have done first impression videos of markers, even these Spectrum Noir markers. I believe Jaza did one as well. Some of these videos might be sugar-coated and some not sugar-coated at all. I'm just here to say that mine is not going to be sugar-coated at all, and even though they sent the markers to me, I'm just going to give you guys my honest perspective. Now, all those other guys give honest perspectives as well. I believe mine is going to stand out a little bit because my perspective will be coming from someone who creates manga / comic professionally, and I'm also not going to sugarcoat anything. And then I'll explain why, whether these markers are actually better than Copic markers or not, to a degree, it doesn't matter too much, because what truly matters is the user and not so much the tool. And I'll be using a Demon Slayer illustration to prove my point. Demon Slayer / Kimetsu no Yaiba is the new super popular AF Shonen Jump series. The manga's out, the anime is out by Koyoharu Gotoke. See my Japanese accent? I'm killing it! Or I butchered it. Point is, Demon Slayer is huge right now. Said to be one of the biggest anime to come out in all of 2019. And I'm looking to get into it as well. A lot of people were saying that episode 5, episode 19 are hook level episodes. But that's a video for another time. I bring it up to point out the marker work that is done for the volume covers of Kimetsu no Yaiba / Demon Slayer and compare it to what we could actually create with the Spectrum Noir markers. Copic markers seem to be the most popular ones, and they're the markers that, using them probably makes you feel like, it's gonna make your work look better, but that's not true. You could still use Copics and create a dumpster fire. Koyoharu here at the top of his game, one of the biggest manga out right now, one of the biggest anime out right now as well, and looking at the cover illustrations for the volumes, it doesn't seem like he uses Copic markers, at least not to me, which says to me that you don't have to have Copic markers, 1. 2, you can just create work that's professional looking and works for you with whatever markers that work for you. 3, some markers are better than others, but usually it's barely, and as long as you're in the same ballpark, you can create similar looking work. Similar in levels of having that professional look and achieving whatever you want to achieve artistically. So even though Copic markers are a go-to, honestly, even for me, we're going to be figuring out if the Spectrum Noir markers are a good Copic alternative and whether they're just good markers, period. Markers that I can use as a professional for my own comic / manga work. And then we'll be using the Demon Slayer illustrations by Koyoharu as a standard. So the question just boils down to, do these Spectrum Noir markers slay? You see what I did there? So these markers were sent to myself and a bunch of other Saturday AM artists, and we were just to give our feedback, especially as creators. It's always fun to get our perspective. People who make comics and do traditional works with brush markers a lot. So this is their Illustrator line for Spectrum Noir, as you can see. And they have a new line, which is their Classique line, which is a more chiseled tip markers. And we're just going to be checking them out overall, and I'll be giving my thoughts. The version of the Illustrator line that I have right here is the one with 36 brush markers in it. And obviously you can see it has the brush marker, and then it has like a chisel tip option. And I believe, yeah, you can see it right here. And I'll open it in a second. But yeah, the brush marker, and they got a chisel tip at the other end. And similar to how you have the brush markers with a Copic brush on one end and a chisel tip on the other end, except maybe the chisel tip here is a little broader. Got a lot of options. I believe the 36 pack has, all the essentials. You got stuff that you can use for skin. You have your primary colors, green, purple, all the essential stuff, gold. And then, you can have a blast with these. I'd assume if you're starting out with your brush markers and just test things out, but you want to use it at least for a little while, this is a good place to start. It has all the basics, 36, brush marker, and a chisel tip. I think this is a nice start to test out the Illustrator line. The Classique line has both chisel tips, chisel ends, but one is broader than the other, as you can see. I do like the packaging. I think the packaging is real slick. I don't know why this one is black and the illustrators are white. I don't know, maybe these are mysterious, you know what I mean? But One of the cool things about this is it also gives you like samples of what they imagine the colors will be used for mostly. So you got like leaves here. These ones are like mostly skins. So they like give an example. So these kind of give you an idea of what this batch can be used for. See, they got it right here. It's like they're both chisel tips, but you know, one's finer than the other. So these are not the brush markers. So if you're looking for the brush, you definitely don't want the Classiques. You want the Illustrator, but we will be testing both of them out. And I think it's really cool how it's, you know, separated. One of the things with Copic markers is you get the back and it's like a bunch of markers. You kind of have to organize it yourself. So if you're new to coloring, this kind of organizes it for you, I guess. I wouldn't necessarily need it. It's not like a major thing, but it's nice if you like things organized. So let's open these. And there you go. Kind of got this hexagonal shape. I think it feels pretty nice to hold. Don't have any issues there so far. Maybe that might change as I use it, but so far so good. And I think the closest things to compare them to would be Copic Sketch Markers, and then you can just kind of see them side by side. Testing this bad boy out. I think it's nice, and it closes pretty well, so I'm assuming it's tight. That way they last longer. Only time will tell how long these actually last. You might want to do some personal research on that, but I'm assuming they last pretty well. Seems fine to me. I think it's actually pretty good. Ink is flowing pretty well, and you know, once we test out an illustration in here for this video, I'll tell us more. Got the chisel tip over here. Hey, you know what? This actually isn't bad. When I was growing up, I used more chisel tip markers than brush markers because of how expensive brush markers, which is another thing I'll talk about. These are actually affordable, but we'll talk about that later on. These are actually pretty affordable, especially when you compare them to Copic markers. These are pretty affordable. I think the whole thing is them being durable, affordable, and quality. So we'll see, we'll test all that out. But I actually like the chisel tip. It's not bad. Guys, so far, so good. Got Mr. Random Character over here. These are actually pretty close to Copic markers as well. But again, time will tell. We'll have more examples, more things to play around with. So I want to test the blending out. Sometimes it might be hard to close, but I don't think it's that big a deal. Once you just pick it and get it right, you'll get it, you know. Go for the flatter side and it'll close. But you might need to get used to that. Starting with the maybe lighter version of what I'm trying to blend over here. Seems pretty wet. Right now almost feels like the same color. So, I mean, it blends pretty well, but like, I think these colors are probably too similar. Let me get something extra over here. I'm gonna add something darker with a little more contrast. I'll go in with a different color, see how it blends. And I have to say, not bad. Does it blend as well as the Copics? I'd say so. because the paper I'm even using is like, you know, just a regular sketchbook. It's not Bristol paper or comic book paper. And I think blending on this kind of paper is actually more difficult. And I like that. I think that's pretty good. I'll say right now, right off the gate, the differences between this and Copic Markers are actually minimal. I think overall, maybe with a full-on illustration, we'll be able to notice it. But right now, if somebody did this and said, hey man, I use a Copic Marker to do this, I wouldn't really notice the difference much, to be honest, if at all. So the blending is well above average, just like Copic Markers. Let's see, go further. Let's take a deep dive. And don't worry guys, I'll test out the markers on different type of paper. This sketchbook is really an old sketchbook of mine, and you can see all the stats here. It's just regular kind of rough paper. It's not that rough, it's just regular sketchbook paper. But compared to, say, comic book paper, it's kind of rough. You can see some of the guidelines for the comic books. And this paper is exactly this, but I guess I cropped it a little bit. But these are how Copic Markers kind of look. And we're going to test something out, and we'll see how the markers work on those as well. It'll probably work better on this type of paper versus this, at least in my style. So I've looked at it all. Seems pretty cool. I'm feeling very optimistic with the Illustrator line of the Spectrum Noir markers. Now we're gonna test out these. And I'm just gonna pick one of them. You got 6 brush markers in it. Well, these are not brush markers. These are chisel and fine markers, like fine tip markers. So we're gonna test these out. Again, I like how they're packaged and I like how they're organized, and you got all different hues and tints of the green to play around with, or blue, or whatever color it is. You can kind of just work, I'm assuming easier, but time will tell. So let's test these out. I don't want to rip this up like a barbarian. Yeah, there you go. Because I was about to just yeah, that was ugly. Got some slick black. Testing these out. And see, you got these chisel tips that are, you know, closer in line with the chisel tips of Copic Markers, except actually wider. Again, these are, I'm just comparing it to the sketch line of Copic Markers. I think that's good reference. I think that those are, when it comes to the Copic Marker lines, those are the markers that it's closest to, at least in size, for the Classiques and the Illustrator. Except the Illustrators, they have a brush end, and these are both chisel tip, well, fine tip, chisel tip, fine tip, brush. So testing out the chisel tip again, it's just, or the fine tip, it works how you would expect it to, and a lot of alcohol is flowing from it, so to an extent it works like a brush tip, but it's chisel. So it's not a bad, probably one of the best. I literally don't like chisel tips, or fine tips, or, you know, I always love the brush tips. I feel like that's part of the reasons why brush markers are as big as they are today. Copic markers usually just have the most clout in street cred because, you know, I feel like they're the most popular overall. But in general, these are actually pretty good. These are actually pretty good. I like them. And that's not because they sent it to me. I actually like them. Sometimes with Copic markers, I've had some experiences where there's like too much alcohol, so when you're using them, it kind of overflows. But so far, I've not experienced that with these at all. I will say though, when you're using the markers, when you're trying to cover surfaces with the marker, it's not completely flat. Like sometimes you can see it almost has somewhat of a watercolor touch to it, just slightly, ever so slightly, to where you can't, at least I'm not yet achieving anything completely like flat, like something with the green where it's maybe just this hue of the green throughout. And maybe because I touched that part and it went over a little bit too much, which is also like a good thing. I think You just need to know how to use it and get some experience using it, and then you'd be in a good place. With Copic markers, sometimes it's much easier to kind of get like a flat tone. But here we kind of achieve that a little bit with these. But over here, it's not completely flat. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes you don't want it to be flat. So when it's flat, it kind of looks cheap. But, you know, it all depends on what you want. And I think these are, so not bad. And again, this paper is not something I would usually use for my markers. I won't usually use these for markers, because this kind of paper, it probably helped dry up your markers really quick, versus the actual comic book paper markers that I use. Well, comic book paper, deleter comic book paper is what I use. And so versus that, you're not going to have that problem as much. So you can see what I'm saying over here. Here, you can kind of still see that line. Whereas Copic markers, yes, if you go over with Copic markers a lot, you're going to kind of see some of the strokes a little bit, or you're going to be able to create darker areas than others, or than other areas. But I feel like these markers kind of do that much more. So they may take some getting used to. But again, it's not something that's unappealing. Maybe I want to go in with a darker tone. See what we got here. Got a bunch of them sent to me, so there are definitely different versions. Some for skin, I don't know, flowers. They give like samples here. I guess something a little more snowy, blah, blah, blah. But so far, so good. And even though they're chisel and fine tip markers, and they're not brush markers, if you're looking for something that isn't brush marker and has a lot of alcohol and can mimic brush markers a little bit, recommended for me. The cool thing about these is I believe that the Classique markers and the Illustrator markers, they're both Spectrum Noir markers, so they kind of still work together. Don't worry, this is not an actual character. I am just fooling around, and I think I've ruined it. Got some kind of manual looking thing in here, you know, Classique, Spectrum Noir, almost like a guide for newcomers. Probably gives you some tips and tricks on how to use. So these will come in handy as well. As you guys know, you can get markers in all sorts of places and all sorts of stores in real life or online, and everybody's gonna have different prices. But so far from my research, Spectrum Noir markers are actually pretty consistent. So you can see for each marker is about like $2.49, and that's pretty consistent across the board. And this is Crafter's Companion, and then you can see here for their 36 pack, which is kind of what I got, and here they have it at $75, pretty much $75. And you can see the other prices for a 12 pack, 45, basically 6, 22, basically 23, 23. So that's kind of like the price range of things, but we can see that each marker is about $2.49, right? And so you take, let's just take the 36 pack, which is like 75 bucks, and compare that to, you know, say the 36 pack that we find on Amazon. You can find something a little more expensive. I don't know why it's a little more expensive, but here it's $155. Keep searching and find the best price an option for you. Maybe this has to do with shipping or something like that. Well, it says 115 and then 18 for shipping. So you can do a little research and you can find these really, really cheap. And maybe the price jumped up because there's like only 3 left or something. But then you compare it to Copic markers, and let's compare it to the 36 pack. The sketch markers, I think, are the closest version of Copic markers to the Spectrum Noir. And so comparing them, you can see is more expensive, even though it's free shipping, more expensive at $145. But here's where it gets a little dicey. I don't know how is this way on Amazon. Sometimes you can get like some really good deals. And also I have honey on, so maybe that's playing a role. But here, normally, you would have Copic markers at $287. And here they have a deal on Dick Blick for $210. So comparing that to this, which is $115, is a lot, especially when you then compare it to other places you can find it at just 75 bucks. It's crazy. So these are definitely well cheaper than Copic markers. Spectrum Noir, cheaper than Copic markers. And then you can come here to their Amazon shop, and then, you know, I think this is where you get the more accurate prices, I believe. And you can see $29 for the Classique version, which is a new line I think they're running. And you see 12 pack. The ones I've shown in this video are the 6 pack, which are similar to like these ones over here. And you can see the prices: 30 bucks, 30 bucks, 30 bucks, 30 bucks, 30 bucks, $14 for the 6 pack. And those are 6 different markers. And it kind of just goes on like that. And you can see in their navigation, and then you can check out other things. But before we check out the other options that they got, keep looking at Copic markers for one single Copic marker. Remember, we saw one Classique marker, at least the Classique version, $249. I'm sure the Illustrator version would not be that much higher, if higher at all. It would probably be either $249 as well, or somewhere around $3 or even $3.50, let's say. But a Copic marker is $7.99, basically $8 for just one. And these guys have a deal, so it's actually $5.85 for the deal they have going on. But if you go on Amazon, so even Amazon, where I got Honey going on, and maybe you get deal, each marker, using this one as an example, is $7.83. So you're not really saving that much, even though it seems to be free shipping here. And some of these free shipping things are for like if you have Prime and so on and so forth. But clearly a single marker is also way more expensive than a single marker for a Spectrum Noir. And you can see for the Spectrum Noir Illustrator version right here, like I said, $3.95. You can find it. You can do a little search, but I've made it easy for you guys. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check out the Spectrum Noir markers. There's one thing I want to talk about though with the navigation bar that I found out. So if you go for the Illustrator markers, you can find Illustrator markers here as well. I've kind of made it easy, so I have this link in the description for you guys to go check that out. As you can see, the ratings are not great, but what I noticed is there was one person who had like a bad experience with the shipping and something happened, and so he made a review, or he or she made a review on all the markers with the same review and the same score. So you can see a 5-star, 5-star. Not saying that all the reviews are 5-star except for this guy. There's some that are, somewhere in the middle. But this guy posted on everything. These markers are pretty dry. When I opened them, not returnable, complete ripoff, do not buy. Ludo, 1 star. Here, looking at the rating again, these markers are pretty dry, blah, 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 same deal. He or she did it for pretty much everything and skipped this one. That's why you can see it has complete 5 stars over there. And then I think did it for this one. And then funny enough, when he did it here, probably just got tired of typing, just went all AWOL and actually gave it 5 stars. Great condition, not dried out. So I wouldn't necessarily trust these particular reviews, or at least you can read the reviews and judge for yourself, but I recommend at least looking through them all. I think the best is to actually see, as you can see in this video, I'm using it in front of you and you can see how good they are or bad they are depending on your perspective. And I believe, again, other art YouTubers have done videos on these markers, example Jazza, and for the most part I think he liked them as well. When it comes to affordability, cheaper than Copics, overall affordable, I'd say so. Single markers $3.95 for Illustrator markers, and then $2.49 for the Classiques. Now for this next phase, we're just trying to figure out if these markers are 1, affordable, durable, and quality. So now we've talked affordability, we can now talk about a couple other things that I noticed while putting this illustration together, now that we're actually using it to color something a little more final. In addition to the nice packaging, is it durable in quality? Keep in mind, keep the caps on. They're pretty tight, so that's good. And you don't want the markers to dry out because of that. I believe the markers last a long time, as long as Copics maybe. I can't say for sure, I just got them, time will tell. But Copics definitely last a long time, and I'm talking like years. And these look similar, so take that however you will. Also, I believe the markers, just like Copic markers, can be refilled when dried out. According to one of the other Saturday AM staff, Jackie, who got the markers sent to her as well, Jackie said, and I read somewhere online, that other versions of these markers can even allow you to switch the tips and nibs from like chisel to fine to brush and so on. So like Classique markers are fine and chisel ended by default, so we can actually switch that and customize it to like a brush end slash tip slash whatever, you know what I mean. And we may explore that in another video. The hexagonal shaped marker seems strong, firm, and durable, but it takes some getting used to. I'm already used to the round shaped Copic Sketch Markers, so while I was holding these, sometimes I thought it would slip off my fingers. But I got the hang of it real quick, and now it's all good, so I don't think it'll be an issue for anybody. I also noticed with the markers when I apply too much pressure on the inks from my Pentel brush, it smudged a bit. But as long as you're patient and in no rush, you should be fine. And it works even better if you allow the inks completely dry, but still, be careful. I have had the same issues with Copics once or twice before, but it's very rare, much less so. Sometimes the inks aren't even completely dry and the Copics still work fine. Doesn't smudge a bit. So these won't smudge as well as long as you're patient. The markers have great fine and chisel tips. I can't say if they're the best or nothing, but they're generally in the same ballpark feel and consistency wise with Copic markers. Same with the brush as well, but slight minimal differences as we've seen from earlier. The alcohol flow here is solid. Copics are solid too, but sometimes, especially brand new Copics, they overflow for me and they've almost ruined a lot of my illustrations. I don't have that issue here at all. Speaking of overflow, I use Copic's colorless blender to clean things up, and Spectrum Noir obviously have a colorless blender if you color over the lines and you want to do a little cleanup, just like with Copics, or if you want to blend things way better, you can use the colorless blender. We may explore that in a different video. Overall quality is on par with Copics, give or take. Would I switch? Personally, I use both. And no, that is not a cop-out because it doesn't really matter. Like, if I told you I made this illustration with Copics, would you be able to tell the difference? My point exactly. So I'd use both, I'd buy both, but if I was starting out and maybe new to art, I may opt for Spectrum Noir markers just for their cheap pricing alone. That said, I already have Copic markers. They're cool, even though they're kind of old, but I have colors with my Copic Sketch Markers that I may not have with my Spectrum Noir Classique markers or Illustrator markers, so I can see myself kind of mixing things up. Copics do have that slight edge when it comes to interaction with certain inks, but if patient, so does Spectrum Noir markers. The tool matters not. The user does. Young grasshopper. And using the Demon Slayer illustration as an example, not all pros use specifically Copics. The narrative that Copics are the end-all be-all is just marketing. I mean, they're good. I love how they feel. I like their quality and everything. But it's also good and even lucky marketing for them. They're one of the first, so it makes sense. One of the best, but you can't deny the marketing. Look at the side-by-side of the illustration and forget what you think looks better. The point is, at least to me, is that they're both on par when it comes to the quality levels and for a professional feel. I even sketched it, inked it, and colored it in a similar style to the original creator, just so it was easier to just compare and only focus on the marker work. And all the tools I used were completely different, most likely, compared to whatever tools the original creator of Demon Slayer used. I actually like these Spectrum Noir markers. I'd recommend them. So I'll probably use them more often. And I'm also a little too broke to get new Copic sets. So there you go. So wish me luck watching Demon Slayer. And if you found this video informative in any way, don't forget to slay the like button, slay the subscribe button, and hit that bell so you stay notified each time I upload absolutely anything. And if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below or comment whatever you want. If you're interested in getting these markers, there will be a link in the description. If you want to check out my series, Apple Black, Published and Serialized, and Saturday AM, there will be links to everything, social media, all the links you could possibly need. Saturday AM social media, my social media, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. Reading the first free chapters of Apple Black or purchasing any of the first volumes. Everything will be linked below. Even 2 free months of Skillshare? You're welcome. Shout out to my patrons Arrow, Ayosafo, Fado, Hack, Wolfin, Jaren, Sarah, Keith, and more. Couldn't have done it without you. And check out my other videos. There's more to come. It's Whyt Manga, and I'm out.